Good morning, everybody, and thanks for watching. So, I was helping one of my students, I'm a teacher, in her philosophy class, and a question came up on religion. And it defined religion in part as something that helps people cope with death, which is true. But then I thought of Jesus Christ, who destroys all religion because he actually came and dealt with death himself by entering into it and being taken out of it for creation itself. It's not a set of rules, it's not allegories. It's Son of God Himself entering death and being resurrected and destroying it so that one day death will be completely abolished and every creature will be filled with everything that God is because Jesus Christ entered death. That's real. Jesus Christ came to a real place at a real time to deal with real death for real creatures, to reconcile them to a real God. No religion in the world can claim that. Christianity claims to represent what Jesus Christ did, but they grossly misrepresent who he is and who God is based on Acts chapter 17 when Paul comes out and introduces this one true God to the Athenians for the first time. Because in these statements here on Mars Hill, Paul destroys religion and destroys human free will. You see, in Acts chapter 17, starting in verse 22, Paul is standing on the Areopagus, I believe it's pronounced, Mars Hill, the rock there, and announces the one true God to the Athenians, who he says were very religious. They had their gods and they were devout. But now he's telling them about the one true God of Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ, his Son. So the God who makes, Paul says in verse 24, the one am I announcing to you, the God who makes the world and all that is in it. He, the Lord, inherent of heaven and earth, is not dwelling in temples made by hands. So God is not in temples. He's not in buildings. He's not in churches. Neither is he attended by human hands as if requiring anything. So God requires nothing of us. He's not attended by human hands. He doesn't need humans to do things for him to maintain him. He doesn't require anything from human beings. And in that statement, Paul destroys every religion of all time. Because there is not one religion in the world that does not require you to do something to be a part of their religion. God says he requires nothing of us. Nothing. But yet, every religion, you have to follow rules, you have to believe a certain thing, you have to perform acts or pray certain ways in order to get into the religion and in order to stay in the religion. You have to perform in some way for the deity to be accepted, and you have to continue to perform to keep that acceptance. In some way, no matter how you verbalize it, every religion requires you to do something, where Paul says God requires nothing. He is not attended by human hands as if requiring anything. Doesn't require anything. Why doesn't he require anything? Since he himself gives to all life, breath, and all. So our very lives, our very breath, and if that's not enough, everything else, all. He gives us all. And he does it to all humanity. Remember, Paul's talking to heathen here. These people aren't believers in Jesus Christ. He's introducing the Father, God, to them for the first time. And he's saying that in all of them and in all of creation, every human being, God gives every single one of those human beings their life, their breath, and all. So that's everything. There's not one choice, not one action, not one thought of any person that God has not given to that person. So God doesn't require anything from us because we can't give him anything that he has first not given to us. So we can only give him something if he gave it to us in the first place. Like Romans 11:36 says, who became his advisor, or who gives to him first, and it shall be repaid him, seeing that out of him and through him and for him is all. It's just like faith. Yeah, do we give faith to God? Sure, but where does that faith come from? Ephesians 1:4, 2 Timothy 1:9 through 11 says that we're given the grace and faith before the foundation of the world. God chose us. So he gives us the faith. And then once we receive it, we give it to him. So we can only give God faith if he gave it to us in the first place. See, he chooses first. And then whatever he gives us, we give back to him. We cannot create something independently of him and present it to him, and then he is surprised by it or has to react or adjust things because of what we have given him. We can't do that. We can't act independently of God. He gives us everything that we give to him, even our good works. In Ephesians chapter 2, I think it's verse 10 or 11, even the good works we walk in were created beforehand for us to walk in by God. So everything that we do is from God, and everything that we present to God, we only have because he gave it to us in the first place. Therefore, he doesn't require anything from us because it's all from him. As Paul said in 11:36 of Romans, that out of him, God, through him, God, and for him, God, is all. And here, he himself gives to all life and breath and all. What does that not include? What is not included in the all there? And then if you go down to verse 28, it says, for in him we are living and moving and are. So again, these are heathen that Paul's talking to. These aren't believers. So this is for all creation. In him we are living and moving and are. So our very lives, our every movement, everything we do is in God. Everything we are. Everything that makes up our being, our thoughts, our personalities, our poor decisions, our good decisions. Everything that makes us up is what we are. And we can never, no matter what we do, separate from what we are. Therefore, we can never separate from God. Because we are, everything we are is in God. So our very being is held. I know we have an experience of evil here on earth, as Ecclesiastes 1:13 says, because we feel that separation from God now, so that when we're brought back to him and he fills us up with everything that he is, then we'll have that contrast and we'll understand and have a greater joy of how great God is and how wonderful life is with him, because we had an experience separate from him, because we had an experience of evil. But in our actions and the plan and every detail of our lives, we can never step out of God's divine plan, because in him we are. And then Paul goes into more of a description, I think, in Romans 1, where he's talking about how people see the attributes of God. They see what God does in his creation around them, but they don't glorify him as God. So in Romans 1, starting in verse 21, for them to be defenseless, because knowing God, not as God, do they glorify or thank him, But vain were they made in their reasonings, and darkening is their unintelligent heart. Alleging themselves to be wise, they are made stupid, and they change the glory of the incorruptible God into the likeness of an image of a corruptible human being. So, what Paul is talking about here is humanity treating God as if he was a human being. That's what people do all the time. They say, oh, God controls every aspect of our life. He plans each and every day and wrote it down in his book before one of them came to be. God works out all according to the counsel of his own will. We are clay, he is the potter. If they relate that to a human being, if I controlled, say I had a girlfriend and I controlled everything she did, they would say, oh, you're controlling. So if God does that, then they say, oh, God must be controlling. Well, God is not he's not a man. He's not a woman. He's God. You see, I have two children. So in a way, they came out of me, right? Obviously, my wife gave birth, but came from my loins as well. So when my kids came into the world, yeah, they're the closest human beings to me, but they can go their separate ways. They can make their own decisions, and I go here, they go there. But we can't do that with God. See, that's the human relationship. We can be separate from each other. Every one of us is separate from each other in a way. But we can never be separate from God. Because our very existence, our very breath, everything we do, our movement, and everything we have given, all that we are is in God. We're never separate from him. If we were separate from him for a moment, existence would be gone. We wouldn't exist anymore. So we can never be separate from God like we are separate from human beings. So the relationship itself is completely different. So when we attribute God to being controlling because he plans every detail of every life and of all creation, then we're relating him to what we think a human is. But we cannot, as one of my friends said in a quote a long time ago, we cannot rationalize the mind of God. When we rationalize the mind of God, we're trying to think of him as a human. What would I do in this situation? Well, God is so far above that rationalizing what he's doing and comparing it to a human being doesn't make any sense. He's God. He's not a human being. So he plans every detail of our life. We live and move and breathe in him. So we need to stop applying human features of control. Oh man, if someone, he's controlling me. No, it's not the same way. If you relate it, him as God and a human as a human. I have someone I know who is very upset with God because their husband left them. Um, had an affair, left. A very bad situation. But doesn't like God because of that. Because she thinks that God is a man and that all men are like this. Literally, that's what she thinks. You talk about attributing human qualities and applying them to God. That's very extreme, but in a way, we all do that because we look at God in a human sense, and if a human being did that to me, then I'd be upset about it, or that wouldn't make sense. So we attribute human qualities to the Almighty God, and we can't do that. That's what Paul is saying here. And I do the same thing. I try to reason with God sometimes because his dealings with me don't make sense. Well, he's so far above and beyond everything we can think or imagine that we have to stop trying to justify or maybe even understand some of the things that he does. But we have to understand that he is God and we are not. And in all that, we understand that it's him. It's him that plans. every detail of our life. It's Him that sent His Son, Jesus Christ, and through His faith, His death, His entombment, and resurrection will bring every creature back to God in the end. It's all of God, and we can do nothing to step out of His plan.